The desert sun was burning hot that Tuesday morning in Nevada. The temperature was already past 90 degrees and it was only 9 in the morning. General Marcus Hawthorne stepped out of the black SUV and looked around the military shooting range. He had been a Navy SEAL for over 30 years. He had seen thousands of soldiers try to prove themselves. Today would be no different, he thought, or so he believed. Hawthorne was a tall man with gray hair cut military short. His face showed the marks of a life spent in combat zones. His eyes were sharp and missed nothing. He wore his uniform with pride, and the medals on his chest told stories of battles won and missions completed. Today, those sharp eyes looked at the shooting range with doubt. The Pentagon had sent him here to watch something special. They told him it was important. They told him to bring other generals. They told him this would change everything. Hawthorne did not believe in things that changed everything. He believed in training, discipline, and hard work. 2 other generals walked beside him. General Patricia Morrison came from the Army. She was a short woman with red hair and a serious face. She had spent 25 years proving herself in a world that did not always welcome women. She carried a tablet computer and was already reading files. General James Reeves was from the Air Force. He was younger than the others, only 48 years old. He walked with confidence and talked with certainty. Both of them had received the same phone call. Both of them had been told to come watch. A young captain met them at the entrance to the range. He saluted quickly. His name tag read Wilson, and he looked nervous. Meeting 3 generals at once would make anyone nervous. "Generals, welcome to Range 7, Captain Wilson said. His voice shook just a little. "Everything is ready for the demonstration." "What exactly are we demonstrating, Captain?" Reeves asked. He did not like wasting time. Wilson led them to a covered observation area. It gave shade from the terrible sun. From here they could see the entire shooting range. The desert stretched out before them, flat and empty. Heat waves rose from the sand, making everything look like it was underwater. "We are testing a new precision shooting program," Wilson explained. He pointed to 3 targets set up in the distance. "Those targets are placed at 1,200 yards, 1,400 yards, and 1,600 yards. Hawthorne raised his eyebrows. 1,600 yards was over 9 football fields long. It was almost a mile. Shooting at that distance was hard even for the best snipers. Shooting in the desert heat made it nearly impossible. The heat made the air move and dance. It made targets look like they were in different places than they really were. "Who is taking these shots?" Morrison asked. She was looking at her tablet, reading something that made her frown. "That would be me, ma'am." The voice came from behind them. All 3 generals turned around. Standing there was a woman in military tactical gear. She was small, maybe 5 feet 4 inches tall. She looked thin, almost too thin. Her dark hair was pulled back tight. Her face was calm, showing no emotion. She wore shooting glasses and carried a rifle that looked custom-made. This was Sarah Chen. Hawthorne studied her for a long moment. She did not look like a soldier who could make impossible shots. She looked like someone who should be working in an office, not on a shooting range. He had seen many soldiers in his life. The best shooters usually had a certain look. They were usually bigger, stronger, with steady hands and cold eyes. This woman looked like a stiff wind could blow her over. "You are taking the shots?" Reeves asked. His voice carried doubt that he did not try to hide. "Yes, sir," Sarah said. Her voice was quiet but steady. She did not seem bothered by their doubt. She had seen that look before. Morrison was still reading her tablet. "It says here you were an intelligence analyst for 8 years. You worked behind a desk analyzing data from Middle East operations. Then 3 years ago, you suddenly started shooting. Is that correct?" "Yes, ma'am," Sarah answered. "And now you are supposed to be better than our Special Forces snipers?" Hawthorne asked. He did not mean to sound rude, but the words came out harsh anyway. Sarah looked at him directly. Her eyes were strange, he noticed. They did not quite focus on his face. Instead, they seemed to look through him or around him. "I do not know if I am better, sir. I just shoot differently." "Differently how?" Reeves pushed. "I see things other people do not see," Sarah said simply. The 3 generals looked at each other. This was starting to sound like a waste of time. They were busy people. They had wars to plan, soldiers to command, and budgets to fight over. They did not have time for riddles. Captain Wilson stepped forward quickly. He could feel the tension growing. "Perhaps we should begin the demonstration, ma'am, sirs. You can judge the results for yourselves." Hawthorne checked his watch. It was 9:15. Fine, let us see what you can do, Sarah nodded once. She walked toward the firing line without another word. Her steps were careful and measured. She carried her rifle like it was part of her body. When she reached the shooting position, she knelt down and began setting up. The three generals moved to the observation rail. They picked up binoculars to watch. Through the powerful lenses, they could see the three targets clearly. Each target was a standard military silhouette. Black shapes cut from metal, designed to show bullet impacts clearly. At these distances, they looked tiny. Like little toys in the vast desert, Wilson spoke into a radio. Range is hot. All personnel clear. Shooter is ready. Hawthorne watched Sarah through his binoculars. She was lying flat now in the prone shooting position. Her rifle was supported by a bipod. She was looking through her scope, completely still. The wind was blowing. He could see dust moving across the range. He could see sagebrush bending. The wind would push bullets off course. Even a small breeze could make a bullet miss by several feet at these distances. What kind of rifle is that? Morrison asked. Wilson looked at his notes. It is a custom build, ma'am. She designed it herself with help from our research team. The scope uses experimental optics. I do not understand all the technical details. Of course she did, Reeves muttered. He sounded tired already. Minutes passed. Sarah did not move. She was like a statue. Hawthorne had seen this before. Some shooters took forever to take their shot. They calculated wind, temperature, humidity, elevation, and a dozen other factors. They tried to make everything perfect. Then they missed anyway. The desert did not care about calculations. Is she going to shoot today or tomorrow? Reeves asked sarcastically. The words were barely out of his mouth when the rifle cracked. The sound was sharp and loud, echoing across the empty desert. Before Hawthorne could even focus his binoculars on the first target, Wilson's voice came through a speaker. Hit, center mass. First target. Hawthorne felt a small surprise. A good shot, yes. But one good shot proved nothing. He had seen hundreds of soldiers make one good shot. It was the second and third shots that mattered. It was making the shot when you were tired, when you were scared, when everything was going wrong. That was what separated good shooters from great ones. But Sarah was not celebrating. She was not even checking to see if she hit. Her hands moved smoothly, working the bolt of her rifle. A spent shell casing flew out and landed in the sand. She chambered a new round. Her eye never left the scope. Her breathing never changed. The second target was farther away, 1,400 yards. The wind had shifted too. Hawthorne could see it in the way the dust was moving. It was coming from a different direction now, from the northwest. Sarah would have to adjust. Any good shooter would need at least 30 seconds to recalculate. Sarah took 5 seconds. The rifle cracked again. Hit, center mass. Second target. This time Hawthorne felt more than surprise. He felt the first whisper of something he rarely felt. Doubt in his own judgment. He lowered his binoculars and looked at Morrison and Reeves. Both of them had stopped smiling. Both of them were watching Sarah with new attention. 2 lucky shots, Reeves said. But his voice had changed. The certainty was gone. Maybe, Morrison said quietly. The third target was the impossible one, 1,600 yards away, almost a full mile. At that distance, a bullet dropped over 30 feet from where the barrel pointed. The wind could push it several feet left or right. The heat shimmer made accurate aiming nearly impossible. Even with the best equipment, even with a spotter helping with calculations, this was a shot that experienced snipers missed more often than they made out. The Pentagon briefing had specifically said that this shot was tactically impossible in field conditions. Those were the exact words in the classified document. Hawthorne had read it on the plane. The scientists who designed this test had not expected anyone to make this third shot. They included it just to establish the upper limit of what could not be done. Sarah lay behind her rifle, perfectly still. The wind picked up, throwing sand against the observation building. Hawthorne watched a dust devil form between the shooter and the target. The spinning column of sand and air danced across the range like a ghost. She should wait for the wind to calm, he said. Sarah did not wait. The rifle spoke a third time. The sound rolled across the desert and faded into silence. Everyone was holding their breath. Through his binoculars, Hawthorne watched the third target. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the impact indicator flashed. The briefing room was cold compared to the desert heat outside. Air conditioning hummed quietly as the 3 generals sat around a metal table. Captain Wilson had brought them here immediately after the shooting demonstration. The room had no windows, just white walls, fluorescent lights, and a large computer screen at one end. Sarah Chen was not with them. Wilson had explained that she needed to go through a medical evaluation after shooting. That was standard procedure, he said. But the way he said it made Hawthorne suspicious. Nothing about this situation felt standard. Wilson locked the door behind them. He pulled down a security shade over the small window in the door. Then he moved to the computer and entered a long password. The screen came to life, showing a classified document header. The words "Top Secret, Special Access Required" glowed in red letters. "What you are about to see is known to only 47 people in the entire military," Wilson said. His nervous energy from earlier was gone. Now he spoke with the serious tone of someone delivering bad news. "You three make 50. The President knows. The Secretary of Defense knows. A handful of scientists and doctors know. That is all." "Get on with it, Captain," Reeves said, but his voice was not harsh anymore. The shooting demonstration had shaken him. Wilson clicked a button. The screen showed a medical file. At the top was a photograph of Sarah Chen, but she looked different in the photo. Her face was softer, her smile was real. The date on the photo was 7 years old. Sarah Chen joined military intelligence when she was 23 years old, Wilson began. She was brilliant. Her test scores were the highest in her class. She spoke 3 languages. She could analyze data faster than people with 10 years more experience. By the time she was 28, she was one of our best analysts for Middle East operations. Morrison leaned forward. "I read this in her file. She worked in an office in Virginia. She never deployed overseas." "So what changed?" Wilson clicked to the next slide. It showed a police report. The date was 7 years ago, 3 months after the photograph was taken. She was driving home from work one evening. A drunk driver ran a red light and hit her car at 60 miles per hour. The impact was on the driver's side. Sarah's car rolled 3 times. She was not expected to survive. The next slide showed medical scans, X-rays of a broken body, CT scans of a brain that had been severely injured. Hawthorne had seen combat injuries that looked better. She was in a coma for 2 weeks, Wilson continued. When she woke up, the doctors said she was lucky to be alive. But the brain injury was severe. They told her she would never work in intelligence again. Maybe never work at all. "So how did she go from brain damage to super sniper?" Reeves asked. The question sounded rude, but it was what they were all thinking. Wilson clicked to another slide. This one showed more brain scans, but these were different. They had colors highlighting different areas. Red, blue, green, and yellow sections showing brain activity. "This is a normal brain when someone is looking at a target," Wilson said, pointing to the first scan. "These areas light up. Visual processing, spatial awareness, basic motor control." He pointed to the second scan. "This is Sarah's brain when she looks at a target." The difference was shocking. Sarah's brain was lit up like a Christmas tree. Areas that should not be active were glowing brightly. Sections that normally did not work together were somehow connected. A woman's voice came from behind them. "What you are looking at is called acquired savant syndrome. It is extremely rare." Everyone turned. A woman in a white lab coat had entered through a side door that Hawthorne had not noticed. She was in her 50s with gray-streaked black hair and tired eyes behind glasses. She walked with the confidence of someone who knew more than anyone else in the room. "I am Dr. Elizabeth Martinez," she said. "I am a neurologist. I have been studying Sarah's condition for 3 years." "Studying?" Morrison asked. "Or using?" Dr. Martinez did not flinch from the accusation in Morrison's voice. "Both, if I'm being honest, may I?" She gestured to the computer. Wilson stepped aside. Dr. Martinez took control of the presentation. She pulled up more brain scans, charts, and medical data that meant nothing to Hawthorne. He was a soldier, not a scientist. "Let me explain this in simple terms," Dr. Martinez said. She must have seen the confusion on their faces. When Sarah's brain was injured, something unusual happened. Her brain tried to heal itself, but in doing so, it rewired certain pathways. The areas that handled social interaction, face recognition, and emotional processing were damaged. Those areas did not heal normally. "So she lost abilities," Hawthorne said. "Yes, but her brain compensated. It rerouted those neural pathways through different areas, specifically through the areas that handle mathematical processing and visual calculation. The result is that Sarah no longer sees the world the way we do." Dr. Martinez pulled up a video. It showed Sarah at a shooting range, looking through a rifle scope. but superimposed over the video were numbers, equations, and geometric shapes. Lines appeared showing wind direction. Calculations scrolled past showing bullet drop. It looked like something from a science fiction movie. This is an approximation of what Sarah sees, Dr. Martinez explained. When she looks at a target, her brain automatically calculates distance, wind speed, air temperature, humidity, elevation angle, and about 30 other factors. She does not think about these things. She just sees them. The calculations happen instantly, faster than any computer we have built. The room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. The three generals stared at the screen. They were watching the impossible explained, and somehow that made it more disturbing. "Are you telling me," Reeves said slowly, "that a car accident turned her into a human targeting computer?" "That is exactly what I am telling you," Dr. Martinez said. "And before you ask, no, we cannot replicate it. We cannot train someone to do this. We cannot create this through surgery or drugs or any kind of procedure. It happened by accident, by a very specific type of brain injury that healed in a very specific way." Morrison stood up and walked to the screen. She touched the image of Sarah's brain, her finger tracing the glowing pathways. "What did she lose? You said she lost abilities. What exactly?" Dr. Martinez's expression grew sad. She cannot recognize faces anymore. Not her mother, not her sister, not her friends. When she looks at a person, she sees shapes and movement but no identity. She recognizes people by their voice, their walk, their height and build, but faces are meaningless to her. "That is why she would not look at me," Hawthorne said quietly. He remembered how Sarah's eyes had looked through him instead of at him. "Yes. She has learned to look near people's faces to be polite, but she cannot tell one face from another. She also has difficulty with emotional processing. She understands emotions intellectually, but she does not feel them the way others do. Social situations are exhausting for her because she has to manually calculate how to respond instead of responding naturally." "And the shaking after she shot?" Morrison asked. "What was that about?" Dr. Martinez pulled up another chart. This one showed brain activity over time. Using her ability causes massive neural strain. Imagine doing complex calculus in your head while also performing a physical task that requires perfect control. Now imagine doing that 6 times in 20 seconds. Her brain was operating at maximum capacity. The shaking is not fear or nervousness. It is neurological exhaustion. "Does it hurt her?" Hawthorne asked. He was not sure why that question mattered to him, but it did. "Yes. After demonstrations like today, she gets severe migraines. They can last for hours or even days. She takes medication for them, but the medication makes her foggy and slow, so she usually just suffers through them." Reeves shook his head. "This is insane. We cannot build a program around someone who gets brain damage every time she shoots." "It is not quite that severe," Dr. Martinez said, "but you are right to be concerned. There are long-term risks we do not fully understand yet. The brain is not meant to operate this way. We do not know if her condition will remain stable or if it will deteriorate over time." Wilson pulled up another document on the screen. "This is the proposed program. The Pentagon wants to find others like Sarah. People who have had similar brain injuries that resulted in similar abilities, not just for shooting but for other military applications. Imagine someone who can calculate artillery trajectories instantly, or someone who can analyze satellite images and see patterns that computers miss, or someone who can learn languages after hearing them once. You are talking about building a unit of brain-damaged people with superpowers," Morrison said flatly. "Do you hear how insane that sounds?" "I do," Wilson admitted. "But imagine the tactical advantage. Imagine having soldiers who can do the impossible." Hawthorne stood up. He walked to the screen and stared at Sarah's medical files. He thought about the 30 years he had spent in the SEALs. He thought about the men he had trained, the men he had led into combat, the men he had buried. He thought about the mission that had earned him his 3rd Silver Star, when everything went wrong and only perfect shots had saved his team. "Where is Sarah now?" he asked. "In the medical bay," Dr. Martinez answered. "She will be there for at least another hour. I want to talk to her, alone." Wilson and Dr. Martinez exchanged looks. Sarah took a slow breath and continued talking. Her words came out carefully, like each one cost her something. "My sister stopped visiting me 6 months ago," she said. "We used to be close. Best friends since we were kids. After the accident, she came to see me every week. She brought my favorite foods. She told me stories about her children. She tried so hard to make things normal. Hawthorne stayed quiet. He sensed that Sarah needed to say these things and that interrupting would stop her. Then one day she showed up and I could not remember which one she was. I knew someone was at the door. I recognized her voice, but when I opened the door and looked at her face, I saw a stranger. I called her by the wrong name. I called her Amanda. Amanda is our cousin. My sister's name is Jennifer. Sarah's hands tightened around the ice pack. Water dripped through her fingers. She cried. She tried to hide it, but I heard her. I explained to her about my condition, about the face blindness. She said she understood, but she never came back after that. She sends emails now. Short ones. She does not call anymore because I guess hearing my voice without being able to show me her face is too hard for her. I am sorry, Hawthorne said. The words felt inadequate. Don't be. This is what I traded. I traded my sister, my friends, my ability to have normal relationships, all for the ability to shoot better than anyone else. And the Pentagon thinks that is a good trade. They want to find more people like me. They want to build an entire program around broken people with special skills. She looked toward him, her eyes pointing somewhere near his left shoulder. So I will ask you, General Hawthorne, is it a good trade? Is being able to hit an impossible shot worth losing everything that makes life worth living? Hawthorne stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly under the brutal sun. He could see the shooting range from here, empty now. The targets stood in the distance like small monuments to what he had witnessed. No, he said finally. No, it is not a good trade. Then you need to stop this program, Sarah said. Her voice was stronger now. You need to tell them no, because they will not listen to me. I am just a test subject, but you are General Marcus Hawthorne. You have medals and respect and 30 years of service. If you say no, they might listen. You want me to shut down a program that gives you purpose? Hawthorne asked. You just told me this makes you feel valuable. I want you to stop them from doing this to other people. I want you to stop them from finding other broken people and telling them that their brokenness is valuable. Because it is a lie, General. My value comes at too high a cost, and I would not wish this cost on anyone. Before Hawthorne could respond, the door opened. Dr. Martinez walked in carrying a medical chart. She stopped when she saw Hawthorne. General, I was not told you were here, she said. I wanted to talk to my new instructor, Hawthorne said. Dr. Martinez and Sarah both looked confused. Well, Dr. Martinez looked confused. Sarah's face remained blank, but Hawthorne had learned that meant the same thing. Instructor, sir? Dr. Martinez asked. Yes. If this program goes forward, Sarah will not be a test subject. She will be an instructor at the Navy SEAL Training Center in San Diego. She will teach our best shooters, not how to see numbers like she does, but how to think beyond what they believe is possible. He turned to face Sarah fully. And if the program does not go forward, the job offer still stands. Either way, you are not staying here to be studied like a lab experiment. You are a soldier, and you will be treated like one. Sarah's blank expression cracked just slightly. Something that might have been relief or gratitude flickered across her face. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. I still have to convince 2 other generals and about 40 Pentagon officials. And based on what I saw today, they are going to want to keep you here. Over the next 3 days, the debate raged inside classified conference rooms. Hawthorne, Morrison, and Reeves argued with Pentagon officials, scientists, and military strategists. Everyone had opinions. Everyone had reasons why the program should or should not move forward. The arguments in favor were compelling. America's enemies were getting stronger. Technology was advancing. Traditional advantages were shrinking. Having soldiers with enhanced abilities, even if those abilities came from accidents and injuries, could save lives and win battles. The arguments against were equally strong. The ethical implications were massive. How do you recruit for a program like this? Do you search hospitals for brain injury patients? Do you tell them they are valuable only because they are broken? What happens when the media finds out? What happens when other countries start deliberately injuring their own soldiers to create similar abilities? On the 3rd day, Morrison found Hawthorne in the hallway outside the main conference room. She looked exhausted. Her red hair was pulled back messily, and her uniform looked slept in. I have been reading files all night, she said. Files about Sarah, files about the program, files about similar cases around the world. And? Hawthorne asked. And we are not the only ones looking into this. China has a program. Russia has a program. Israel has a program. Everyone is trying to find ways to enhance soldiers. Some countries are going further than we would ever go, much further, Hawthorne felt cold. How much further? Deliberately causing brain injuries to see if they can replicate Sarah's abilities. Using drugs that cause permanent changes. Genetic experimentation on volunteers who do not really understand what they are volunteering for. That is insane. That is war, Morrison said grimly. That is what happens when everyone is racing to have the biggest advantage. Ethics become optional. Morality becomes flexible. Everything becomes justified if it helps you win. She leaned against the wall, suddenly looking older than her years. Here is what keeps me up at night, Marcus. If we say no to this program, we are making a moral choice. We are saying that some things are more important than tactical advantage. We are saying that we will not exploit broken people even if it makes us stronger. That sounds like the right choice, Hawthorne said. It does. Until you imagine a scenario where American soldiers die because we did not have Sarah's abilities on our side. Until you imagine a battle lost because we chose morality over capability. How do you live with that? How do you tell the families of dead soldiers that their loved ones died because we were trying to be ethical? Hawthorne had no answer. These were the questions that haunted every military leader. The balance between winning and being worthy of victory. The line between necessary sacrifice and unacceptable cost. What does Reeves think? He asked. Reeves wants the program. He thinks we can make it ethical if we are careful. Only voluntary participation. Full disclosure of risks. Generous compensation. Make it a choice instead of exploitation. And what do you think? Morrison was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I think Sarah Chen is not the only one broken by this program. I think everyone involved gets broken a little bit. The scientists who study her. The officials who exploit her. The generals who have to decide her fate. We all lose something when we start treating human beings like weapons. That night, Hawthorne could not sleep. He lay in his hotel room staring at the ceiling, thinking about Sarah's face when she talked about her sister. Thinking about the shaking in her hands after she shot. Thinking about 30 years of sending people into danger and sometimes not getting them back. At 2 a.m, his phone rang. It was Morrison. There has been an incident, she said. Her voice was tight with stress. You need to come to the medical facility now. Hawthorne dressed quickly and drove through empty desert roads to the base. His mind raced through possibilities. Had Sarah gotten worse? Had something happened with the program? Had there been a security breach? The truth was worse than any of his guesses. When he arrived at the medical facility, he found Morrison, Reeves, Dr. Martinez, and Captain Wilson standing outside Sarah's room. Through the window, he could see Sarah lying on a hospital bed. Medical equipment surrounded her. Doctors worked quickly around her. What happened? Hawthorne demanded. Dr. Martinez answered, her voice shaking. Seizure. A severe one. Started about an hour ago. We cannot get it fully under control. I thought you said she got migraines, not seizures. This is new. Or maybe it was always a risk and we did not see it coming. Her brain has been under enormous strain. The shooting demonstration 3 days ago, then all the additional testing we did afterward. It was too much. Hawthorne watched through the window as doctors injected medication into Sarah's IV. Her body was rigid on the bed, muscles locked in spasm. It was horrible to watch. Is she going to be okay? He asked. We do not know, Dr. Martinez admitted. If the seizure does not stop soon, there could be permanent damage. Worse damage than she already has. Morrison stepped closer to the window, her hand pressed against the glass. This is our fault, all of us. We pushed her too hard. We wanted to see what she could do. We wanted data for our reports and arguments. We forgot she was a person. No, Sarah's voice came weakly from inside the room. One of the doctors had turned on the intercom so the observation room could hear. Not your fault. My choice. Her words were slurred, fighting through the effects of medication and seizure. But she was conscious and trying to speak. Sarah, don't try to talk. 6 months after the shooting demonstration in Nevada, Sarah Chen stood in front of a classroom full of Navy SEAL candidates. The room was not what most people would imagine for elite special forces training. It was just a simple classroom with white walls, folding chairs, and a blackboard. No fancy equipment. No weapons. Just a teacher and students. Sarah wore a simple military uniform without any rank insignia. She was not officially military anymore. The medical discharge had come through 3 months ago. But Hawthorne had hired her as a civilian contractor to teach at the training center, It was a way around the regulations that would have prevented her from serving with her medical conditions. 24 men sat in the chairs, watching her with curious eyes. They were all in their 20s, all physically perfect specimens. They had survived months of brutal training to get here. They could swim for miles, run with heavy packs, operate every weapon the military owned. They were the best of the best, and they were wondering what this small woman could possibly teach them. Sarah could feel their doubt. She could not see their faces, could not read their expressions, but she could hear it in the way they shifted in their seats, in the whispers that stopped when she walked to the front of the room. She had learned to read people through sound and movement instead of facial expressions. "My name is Sarah Chen," she said. Her voice was quiet but clear. "I am here to teach you about mental limits and how to exceed them." One of the candidates, a large man with short blonde hair, raised his hand. Sarah nodded toward the sound of his movement. "Ma'am, with respect, we have already been through Hell Week. We have already learned about pushing past limits. Why are we here?" It was a fair question. Sarah had expected it. Hawthorne had warned her that SEAL candidates were not shy about questioning training they did not understand. "What is your name?" she asked. "Petty Officer Jake Morrison, ma'am." "Petty Officer Morrison, what is the hardest thing you have ever done in training?" Morrison thought about this. "Probably the underwater knot tying exercise. We had to tie specific knots underwater while holding our breath. If we surfaced before finishing, we failed. I almost drowned trying to pass it." "Why did you almost drown?" "Because my lungs were burning. My body was screaming for air. Every instinct told me to surface. But I kept trying to tie that last knot." Sarah nodded. "You were fighting your body's survival instincts. Your body wanted to live. Your mind wanted to succeed. That is mental strength. That is pushing past limits." She paused. "Now let me ask you something harder. What would you have done if you knew that tying that knot would cause permanent brain damage? Would you still have tried?" The room went silent. Morrison frowned, not sure how to answer. "That is what I am here to teach you," Sarah continued. "Not how to push past limits. You already know that. I am here to teach you when to stop pushing. When to recognize that some limits exist for good reasons. When to understand that destroying yourself to complete a mission is not bravery. It is stupidity." Another candidate raised his hand. This one had a deeper voice. "Ma'am, SEALs never quit. That is our core principle. Are you telling us to quit?" "No, I am telling you to be smart about what you are willing to sacrifice. Let me tell you a story." Sarah walked to the blackboard and picked up chalk. She could not draw pictures that made sense because her spatial processing was damaged. But she could write words. She wrote a single word in large letters. Impossible. 3 years ago, I took a shot that military experts said could not be made. The distance was too far. The conditions were too difficult. The shot was rated as tactically impossible. But I made it anyway. I made it 6 times in 20 seconds. She could feel the room's attention sharpen. These men knew about shooting. They understood how difficult that would be. After I took those shots, 3 generals stood in a room debating whether to build an entire military program around me. They wanted to find others who could do impossible things. They wanted to create a unit of people with special abilities. They were willing to spend millions of dollars on this program. "What happened?" Morrison asked. "I had a seizure. My brain could not handle the strain. The doctor said if I kept pushing myself like that, I would suffer permanent damage beyond what I already had. So I quit. I walked away from being special. I walked away from doing impossible things. And that decision, that choice to stop, was the hardest thing I have ever done." She turned back to face the class, her eyes pointing toward the middle of the room. "You all want to be heroes. You all want to be the one who takes the impossible shot, who saves the team, who never gives up no matter what. That is good. That is why you are here. But I need you to understand something important. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is recognize when to stop. Sometimes the smartest decision is to say no to a mission that will break you permanently." A candidate in the back spoke up without raising his hand. "That sounds like quitter talk, ma'am, no offense." "None taken. What is your name?" "Petty Officer David Chen, ma'am." Sarah felt a small jolt. Chen was her last name too, though this man was not related to her. She pushed past the coincidence. Petty Officer Chen, tell me about someone you admire. Someone you consider a true hero. My grandfather, Chen said immediately. He was a Marine in Vietnam, Purple Heart, Bronze Star, the whole deal. He never talked about it much, but everyone in my family knew he was tough as nails. Did he survive the war? Yes, ma'am. Came home and lived to be 78. So he knew when to take cover. He knew when to retreat. He knew when to preserve his life instead of throwing it away on a mission that could not be won. Does that make him less of a hero? Chen was quiet for a moment. No, ma'am, I guess it does not. Exactly. Your grandfather was smart enough to be brave when bravery mattered and cautious when caution mattered. That is what I am teaching you. How to tell the difference. For the next hour, Sarah talked about decision-making under pressure. She talked about recognizing the difference between difficult and impossible. She talked about the mental traps that caused soldiers to push too hard and break themselves unnecessarily. She did not tell them about her accident. She did not tell them about losing the ability to recognize faces. She did not tell them about the migraines that still came regularly, or the medication she took every day to keep her damaged brain functioning. Those were her private pains. Instead, she told them about other soldiers, men and women who had pushed too hard and suffered for it. The SEAL who refused to report a knee injury and ended up crippled for life. The pilot who flew one mission too many and crashed from exhaustion. The analyst who worked without sleep for 4 days and made a mistake that cost lives. Mental toughness is not about ignoring your limits, she said. It is about knowing your limits and operating right up to them without crossing over. It is about being self-aware enough to know when you are about to break. As the class ended, the candidates filed out slowly. Some of them looked thoughtful. Others looked skeptical. Sarah knew that was normal. Changing how people thought took time. One class would not do it. Morrison was the last to leave. He stopped at the door and turned back. Ma'am, can I ask you something personal? You can ask. I might not answer. Why are you not looking at my face when you talk to me? Sarah had been waiting for this question. Someone always asked eventually. I have a medical condition. I cannot process facial features. When I look at you, I do not see your face.
I just see shapes and colors that do not mean anything. So I look near your face to be polite, but I recognize you by your voice and the way you move. Morrison processed this. Is that why you quit the program? The medical condition? Part of the reason.
The bigger reason was that I learned something important. Being able to do impossible things does not make you valuable. Being wise about what things are worth doing makes you valuable. That is a good lesson, ma'am. Even if it is hard to accept. The best lessons usually are. After Morrison left, Sarah sat alone in the classroom for a while. Her head was starting to hurt. Talking for an hour, concentrating on voices and movements, processing questions and formulating answers, all put strain on her damaged brain. She would need to take medication soon and rest for a few hours. But she felt something she had not felt in a long time. She felt useful in a way that did not destroy her. She felt like she was contributing something meaningful, not by doing impossible things, but by teaching others to be smart about what they attempted. General Hawthorne found her there 20 minutes later. He walked in without knocking and sat down in one of the folding chairs. How did it go? He asked. Half of them think I am a quitter. The other half think I might have a point. That is about what I expected. Hawthorne smiled. Give them time. These kids are used to training that tells them they can do anything if they are tough enough. They are not used to training that teaches wisdom instead of toughness. Do you think they will listen? Really listen? Some will. Some will not. But the ones who do listen will be better SEALs for it. They will be the ones who survive long careers instead of burning out young. They will be the ones who know when to fight and when to pull back. And someday, one of them will make a decision that saves lives because you taught them to be smart instead of just brave. Sarah appreciated his confidence. You put a lot of faith in me. 5 years passed quickly at the SEAL Training Center in San Diego. Sarah Chen became a permanent fixture in the curriculum. New candidates arrived, learned her lessons, and went out into the world as operators. Some of them listened to what she taught. Some of them did not. But enough of them listened to make a difference. Sarah's apartment was still small and simple, but it felt more like home now. She had learned which grocery stores were quietest, which times of day she could walk on the beach without crowds, which coffee shop had staff who remembered her voice and did not mind that she never looked at their faces. She had built a life that worked within her limitations. Her migraines still came, but less frequently. Dr. Martinez said her brain had stabilized. The damage would never heal, but it had stopped getting worse. That was the best outcome they could have hoped for. Sarah took her medication every day, rested when she needed to, and accepted that this was her reality now. On a Tuesday morning in March, Sarah was preparing for class when her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she did not recognize, but the area code was Virginia. She almost did not answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? Is this Sarah Chen? A woman's voice, professional and serious. Yes, who is this? My name is Commander Lisa Park. I am stationed at Naval Special Warfare Command. I was given your number by General Hawthorne. I need to talk to you about one of your former students. Sarah felt a cold sensation in her stomach. When someone called about a former student, it usually meant bad news. What happened? Can we speak in person? I am actually in San Diego. I can come to you if that works. An hour later, Commander Park sat across from Sarah in a quiet office at the training center. Sarah could not see the commander's face clearly, but she could hear tension in her voice. Something serious had happened. 3 weeks ago, we had a SEAL team deployed in Syria. Park began. They were running a rescue operation. High-value target. American journalist held by a militant group. The mission went sideways. Enemy forces were waiting. The team leader made a call to abort the mission. Sarah listened quietly. The team leader was Lieutenant Jake Morrison. You taught him 5 years ago when he was just a candidate. He said you were one of his instructors. Sarah remembered Morrison, the big man with blonde hair who had questioned her on the first day. The one who had come to talk to her in the gym. The one who had learned about knowing when to stop. What happened? Sarah asked again. Morrison's commanding officer disagreed with the abort order, said they could still complete the mission. Morrison refused. He said the risk was too high, that they would lose people if they pushed forward. He pulled his team out against orders, and 3 days later, another team went in to attempt the same rescue. They ran into the same ambush. 2 SEALs were killed. The journalist was executed before they could reach him. The mission failed completely. Sarah felt her chest tighten. So Morrison was right. Morrison was right. If he had pushed forward like his commanding officer ordered, his entire team would likely be dead. He made the right call. He knew when to stop. Then why are you here? Park was quiet for a moment. Because Morrison is facing a court-martial. Disobeying orders in a combat zone is a serious offense. His commanding officer wants him punished as an example. Says that SEALs do not quit missions. Says that Morrison's refusal to follow orders showed weakness and undermined command authority. Sarah felt anger building, a hot emotion that her damaged brain could still process clearly. That is insane. He saved his team, I agree. That is why I am here. Morrison says that you taught him to recognize when a mission crosses the line from difficult to impossible. He says you taught him that knowing when to stop is not weakness, it is wisdom. I need you to testify at his court-martial. I need you to explain that what he did was not cowardice but proper tactical judgment. Sarah's first instinct was to refuse. She did not like attention. She did not like crowds. Court-martials meant rooms full of people, questions, scrutiny. It meant explaining her condition, her background, the program that was supposed to stay classified. But then she thought about Morrison. About the young candidate who had questioned her 5 years ago. About the man who had learned her lesson and used it to save lives. About a SEAL facing punishment for doing exactly what she had taught him to do. When is the court-martial? She asked. 2 weeks, Virginia. I know it is a lot to ask. I will do it, Sarah said. If Morrison saved lives because of what I taught him, then I need to stand up for him. Thank you. General Hawthorne said you would say yes. He also said to tell you that he will be there too. Several of us will be testifying on Morrison's behalf. 2 weeks later, Sarah found herself in a military courtroom. The room was formal and intimidating, with flags and seals and serious-faced officers sitting in judgment. Sarah wore a simple suit, her only concession to civilian formality. She had not worn a military uniform in 5 years and did not miss it. Morrison sat at the defense table looking older than she remembered. 5 years of combat operations had added weight to his shoulders and lines around his eyes that she could not see but could imagine. When he saw her enter the room, he stood and nodded in her direction. She nodded back, her gesture aimed at where she thought his face should be. The prosecution went first. The commanding officer, a stern-faced captain named Reynolds, testified that Morrison had disobeyed direct orders. That in combat, orders must be followed without question. That Morrison's refusal to complete the mission had emboldened the enemy and led to the deaths of 2 SEALs 3 days later. If Lieutenant Morrison had followed orders and completed his mission, those 2 men would still be alive, Reynolds said coldly. His cowardice cost lives. Sarah felt her anger growing as she listened. This man did not understand. He thought military service was about blind obedience. He did not understand that sometimes the bravest thing a leader could do was say no. When it was the defense's turn, Commander Park called Sarah to testify. Sarah walked to the witness stand, her movements careful and measured. She was sworn in and sat down, her eyes pointing somewhere near the judge's shoulder because that was what people expected. Please, state your name and occupation for the record, Park said. Sarah Chen. I am a civilian contractor teaching mental, resilience and tactical judgment at the Navy SEAL Training Center in San Diego. How long have you held this position? 5 years. And did you teach Lieutenant Morrison? Yes, he was in my first class. Park pulled out a document. Can you explain what you teach these candidates? Sarah took a breath. I teach them that mental toughness is not about ignoring limits. It is about knowing your limits and operating right up to them without crossing over. I teach them to recognize the difference between difficult missions and impossible missions. I teach them that knowing when to stop is not weakness but wisdom. Why are you qualified to teach this? This was the hard part. Sarah had hoped to avoid talking about her past, but she knew it was necessary. 7 years ago, I was in a severe car accident. I suffered traumatic brain injury that changed how my brain processes information. 3 years after the accident, I was asked to demonstrate certain abilities for a military program. I performed at a level that military experts said was impossible. The courtroom was completely silent now. Everyone was listening. What happened after that demonstration? Park asked. I was offered a position in a special program. They wanted to build an entire unit around people like me, people who could do impossible things. I was told I would be valuable, that my abilities could change warfare. And what did you do? I said no, I quit. I walked away from being special because the cost was too high, because doing impossible things was destroying me, because I learned that some limits exist for good reasons and crossing them permanently damages you. Sarah paused, gathering her thoughts. That is what I teach. That is what Lieutenant Morrison learned, that there is a difference between pushing through difficulty and pushing past the point of no return. Morrison recognized that his mission had crossed that line. He made the hard choice to stop. That is not cowardice. That is exactly what I trained him to do. Captain Reynolds stood up. Permission to cross-examine? The judge nodded. Reynolds approached Sarah. Ms. Chen, are you seriously suggesting that we train our SEALs to quit missions when they get difficult? No. I am suggesting we train them to recognize the difference between difficult and impossible. Difficult missions should be completed. Impossible missions should be aborted before people die unnecessarily. Who decides what is impossible? If we let every soldier make that judgment, we would never complete any mission. Leaders decide. That is what we train them for. That is why Morrison is a lieutenant. He assessed the situation with his team's lives in his hands and made the call that saved them. A call that led to 2 deaths 3 days later. Sarah felt her anger spike. A call that prevented 8 deaths that day. The 2 SEALs who died 3 days later died because someone else made the wrong call. Someone else pushed forward when they should have stopped. Someone else did not learn the lesson that Morrison learned. Reynolds leaned forward. Ms. Chen, is it true that you have a severe brain injury that affects your cognitive function? Yes. Is it true that you cannot recognize faces? Yes.